Hello and welcome to the port of Jaffa. Out there you can see the Mediterranean Sea, behind me some boats in the port itself. There's part of the city of Jaffa, and to the north is Tel Aviv. And the port of Jaffa is a place we read about every year on Yom Kippur, in the story of Jonah, who comes here to board a ship and run away from God. And I think that there's two lessons we can learn that speak to our generation. A time in which we have our own state, but many of us are still living and working in the diaspora amongst the nations. One lesson comes from the conduct of Jonah on the ship, and the other from the port of Jaffa itself. For this port in ancient times was a portal for our ancestors to the wider Mediterranean world. They would travel and trade, wander amongst the different peoples and cultures, and we are offered a rare glimpse into what it was like in the story of Jonah, how they behaved, and we see that in Jonah's behavior. Initially, he keeps a very low profile. Doesn't advertise who he is, what nation he's from, especially when things start going south and there's a storm, he hides. But nonetheless, he becomes a scapegoat. They decide that it's his fault that the ship's about to sink, and when he has his back up against the wall, he does a 180 in his whole approach. And he decides to take pride and say, I'm a Hebrew, I fear the one true God, and he even accepts responsibility. He says, it is my fault that this ship is about to sink because I'm running away from God. Throw me overboard. And surprisingly, by doing so, he actually wins the respect of the entire crew. And after they throw him overboard, they all become God-fearing people and make oaths to God. Now, while of course we must take seriously the dangers of anti-Semitism, I think we can learn from this story that sometimes if we take pride in our Jewish identity, then it can make a powerful impact on the other nations, and they may respond in a way that could be surprising. For the second idea, I'd like to turn our attention to the glistening gold that we could see out on the Mediterranean Sea, which is something that our ancestors saw as well when they looked out from the port of Jaffa, and it represents the opportunity to amass wealth. After all, that was the motivation for wandering amongst the nations, to trade, to conduct business. So there's three places in the Tanakh where the port of Jaffa is mentioned, aside from the story of Jonah. First, we have in the book of Yoshua, Jaffa is part of the territory of Dan. And naturally, the people of Dan became seafarers, people of the sea, but they're actually rebuked for it by the prophetess Deborah, who says in her famous song, Vedan lama yagur oniyot. Why do they dwell on their ships? They got so carried away with their pursuit of wealth that as if they live abroad, they don't live in the country anymore. And she was upset, of course, because they weren't there to answer the call when the rest of the country needed them for war. But we see that later on, the port of Jaffa did prove itself as a crucial part of this country and this nation, when the next two places where it's mentioned in Tanakh is as the port of entry for the cedars of Lebanon, for both the building of the first temple and the building of the second temple. So we see that eventually the message was internalized, that the whole point of amassing wealth is to contribute it to part of national projects, to further the building up of our nation, in our land, and of course further our connection with God as the temple represents. And I think we can learn that message as well in our days, that while many of us are living and working abroad, we need to have a long-term goal of using our wealth to rebuild our nation, lest we, Chas v'Shalom, miss the boat. And of course, I pray that we shall see the third temple built speedily in our days. Rabot, and thanks for watching.